Hi, I'm Susie Terrell with La Center Historical Museum. Today is November 8th, 2022. I'm here with Candy Irish, who was once our president of the museum. And today we're standing in front of our latest display that is a winery that was here in town, high up on the hill of Aspen, overlooked the whole town. And these are articles about that winery. And Candy is going to be talking to the couple who owned and ran the winery. So do you have anything that you'd like to say before you introduce them?
Yes, I do, Susie. Thank you very much. It's going to be a pleasure this afternoon sitting here and talking with Lincoln and Joan Wolverton, longtime residents of our city at the center, and talk a little bit about their dream and how they made it happen.
Okay, Candy, would you like to introduce your guest?
Well, I'd like to introduce to you today the special guest that we have, Joan, and her husband, Lincoln Wolverton. And they live here in La Center, have been La Centerites for many years. And today we're going to talk about their journey and how Lincoln had a dream, and how between the two of them they made that happen. So, would you like to start talking?
Sure. Well, I was raised in the Pacific Northwest, and mainly in Tacoma, and then I went to college in the East, and I spent a quarter in France, in Burgundy, right in the heart of Burgundy, right in the town of Dijon, city of Dijon, and then I spent some time in the military when I was in the military in France. And I recognized, well, I thought I recognized how the climate, the similarities in the climate. So that sort of got me interested in them. And then when I was a college student for a quarter in France, I stayed with a French family that owned a vineyard. And so they had their own wines. So I thought, well, why doesn't somebody grow grapes on the west side of the mountains in Washington? The only grapes at that time being grown were the Concord type grapes. In eastern Washington, they were growing grapes, but not in western Washington. So we sort of picked probably the warmest spot in western Washington, which is down near Portland, and looked around for property and found the place up on the hill here above the center. And when we bought it in 1971, and planted in 72, I think. I think we put our first grapes in the ground. And then for about 6 years, we commuted. And we had we had 2 children at that time, born during those years. And so we sort of decided we had to make a decision about whether to stay with a potential vineyard or just stay in Seattle. And it was I think the decision was you could raise kids in the center with a lot more flexibility of time, and but it was a lot of hard work. And Joan was the one that did all the work.
So as I understood it, that you had the grapes, you had the starch, right, in another place in Brooklyn, or?
We actually bought them from existing vineyards. It came in burlap bags sort of thrown in the front of the house. And I was trying to remember, we got them from several places that were, and you can establish a good plant as a cutting. You just need a twig about a foot long.
Just a stick, yeah.
And you can stick it in the ground, and if keep it wet, it does grow, and it's true to itself.
Well, and that's one problem we don't have here in the Pacific Northwest, is keeping those starts wet, right?
That's right.
And so, so the property that you bought up here, when you brought the plants over, then did you both plant those together?
Oh, wow.
And then we hired actually a person out of Battleground, Kenton Beasley, or I think that was his person, and his family he was a farmer, and he did some of the clearing and planting and setting up the the roads. And then they have, they also ran a sort of a ditch down there, a narrow ditch, and we could put the grapes right in the ground, which we did.
Going to the album planting.
The album of
I have most people have just, children, grandchildren, albums. I have actually a vineyard photo. So we have pictures of the boys on the tractor when I couldn't get a sitter. And learning to drive a tractor. If you never had to do that one, you only driven an automobile and city tractor.
No.
Yes,
So,
3 tractors I went through.
So we commuted from 72 to 76. Joan was with the Seattle Times, a writer with the Seattle Times, and I was in graduate school. And then in 76, we sort of made a decision we needed to make Fisher cut bait, and so we decided to move down. I stayed with my job at that time of going computer services, and then I commuted for 2 more years. And she stayed down here, and then in 78, sort of made a permanent move when I got a job in Portland.
so, the grapes that you planted, what type of grapes are grown best here in western Washington versus eastern Washington? I know, that's where I had come from, and it's totally different than over
Yes.
here.
We didn't know what was going to do best, so we planted some Chardonnay, some Riesling, actually even some Cabernet, and Pinot Noir, and Chenin Blanc. And so we planted them, and just not knowing what was going to do best. It turned out the Pinot Noir did the best.
Won most of the prizes. I mean, other grapes do too, but certain years. But Pinot could handle the cooler climates in the earlier fall, some cold, wet weather than some. It's hard to like in Cabernet, which they do well in Western Washington.
So, and you said that the Pinot, now that's usually an Oregon wine, isn't it?
Well,
Wineries?
Well, the Pinot Noir is the main grape of French Burgundy.
Here, this is it. You gotta pull up my shirt and read the back. Okay?
Okay, we're gonna pull up her shirt and we're gonna read the back of this.
Okay.
Washington answers to Oregon Pinot Noir.
That was one of our Oregon
That's very
t-shirts.
cute.
Yes, Oregon. I thought there'd be a moment I might be able to use this t-shirt.
I think you got
Yes.
your moment.
So when we planted, there were, 3 or 4 vineyards in Oregon at all, is all there were.
And Myron Redford from Amity and Dickie Rath from Erath and Richard Fonzette, we got to know them through wine societies. And
Actually, Myron did it after we did it.
yeah,
But then there was Richard down in
Fonzie?
Rose, southern Willamette Valley.
Roseburg.
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 Yeah, in
Yeah.
Roseburg. Richard Summers, I think was his
Yes.
name.
And we asked questions of them, and sometimes we got cuttings from them, we even more groups of some.
And Dave Lett at Ivory Vineyard basically had grown as thick Erath, that became Erath Vineyards, and Ponzi, and I think that was, or maybe a couple more, but that was really all that were there at the time.
And I got a phone call this year from Myron at Amity, who sold his Amity Vineyards, retired, and he said, "Joan, I just opened your 1980 Pinot, and it's still good."
1980 Pinot, and it's still good.
In the year 2021
Yeah,
or 2.
1980.
Oh my
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing. So why don't you tell us a little bit of your, the problems that you encountered, even though the weather was supposed to be, well, can you just say what?
The climate was
The climate, okay, the climate, but did we have more rain over here than they have in France?
Well, not really. We have a different pattern. We have drier summers and wetter winters, but during the growing season, it's not that different. Although we had some years where the rains came right during the harvest time. You had had to sort of go out and harvest when there were breaks in the weather.
And to me, the problems are completely different, which is natural. But first of all, I was sort of I've always been kind of a pacifist. I was tear gas protesting the Vietnam War. And here I am having to have cannons. They're not real cannons, but they make large booms. And had to learn how to use a shotgun. Became one of the best shots in Clark County. Unfortunately, I was shooting to get birds out of there. Birds just love sweet grapes. And we have robins, we had every single bird, even quail would come in, and all kinds of birds. And then the deer. Can you imagine? They like the leaves. And so they'd come in, and I had to keep scaring all of these animals out daily when they were getting sweet. And then they started getting it all edible. Then I had those. And then, of course, I went through the 3 tractors because you have to protect them from molds. The leaves are susceptible to all kinds of fungi. And so I had, and then with the children, I was a mama. And I'll never forget when I discovered that a round circular plate pan with no bottom was kind of, what do they call it, accordion pleated sort of thing, that they could both go out and carry this thing by themselves, and we could go out to a spot where I was working and put all the toys in. Once I discovered that wonderful little circle of containment, and I didn't have to worry about the kids, and I didn't have to continually have babysitters. And so that was very helpful, as I discovered. Just being able to spend time with them, know where they are, and entertain them, and not have them get lost in the woods.
What about
So-
the little rabbits? I know we have some
Yes.
grapes on our property, they're not like what you have, we just have a little roll. But the rabbits, you go out, and the raccoons too, but the rabbits, they'll just,
That's a very good question, because sometime in that period of time, in the early years when I was really between the deer and the coyote, even coyotes like grapes, all these weird animals like grapes. And between all of those, yes, the little cottontail were eating the ones that were just shoots. And so the forestry department,
Once they got up high enough,
Yeah,
but
the
where did
rabbits
they
were
get those
vicious.
yellow tubes? Somebody started producing rabbit guards.
Oh, no, that was those newspapers. Remember, they were,
Yes.
the Seattle Times used to print their newspapers with the roller presses.
oh, yes.
And they had these, and they used hard metal type. This is long before everything was done electronically. And they used to make, what do they call this? The
Stereotype mats.
stereotype mats. And they were round, because they went on the machines, and they were actually turned out to be a rabbit guard.
Those were the first ones. I later the little yellow Forest Service, I think they protected the little seedlings they planted in the Forest Service. Then those came along, but the first ones were truly, I have a photograph of acres of these newspaper stereotype mats around the graves. But, so that was that was a good lookout.
Yeah.
The Seattle Times, they used to just throw them away or reuse them by making them pulp again and doing the paper, but we used a lot of stereotype mats those first years, yes.
So when did you start making your own wine on your property?
We used to have that already.
Well, we didn't actually build the winery building until like '82, I think. So we had people make it for us.
Henserling made wine for us.
Mike Wallace at Heinzerling,
Uh-huh.
which is in the Yakima Valley.
Right.
And then Dick Ponzi, later on it was Dick Ponzi just down south of Portland. And they made it until '82, they made it until '82, and then we brought it all in-house.
At the winery.
So, and you were the one, you were the winemaker, weren't you?
Yes. Yes, as well as, and fortunately, a lot of the center of teenagers helped with, things too, so I had a crew. They got better as my boys got older, because we would have friends in high school, and then I could get my labor, but, the labor market is very hard. I'm happy to find enough to help, I couldn't do it all, especially as we got into the wine sales, as well as into the growing of the grapes and keeping all the pests away. One of the highlights of my motherhood was our oldest son came back from his, about third year, he was about 20, and he was a third year at Whitman College in Walla Walla, where there's lots of vineyards. And he had a friend on the baseball team there with me, who worked for, Leonetti or some big winery in Walla Walla. They came home, and he came out and said, Mom, I hope you don't quit what you're doing, it's really neat what you do. And I'd use those boys I'd give them small chores, like to go find boxes that were left by mistake in the fields and not picked up by the tractor and wagon. And then I let them stomp the grapes. If we had extra box, they would put their shorts on and go into the plastic and crush them by foot. And so they did little things like that. But I never heard them mention either of them growing up on the vineyard until he got home from college that year. Hope you don't quit. It's really neat what you do.
So, I did ask you, I think, or maybe I haven't asked you this question yet. How did you come to name your winery Salishan?
Well, we wanted an Indian name, and the Salish Indians were one of the tribes around here, as were the Chinook. It turned out probably more Chinook now, but the Salish, so Salishan is
The
adjective
to the
or
tribe,
phrase.
Native American. But if you look at the wine label, this is from a Salish basket. We still have that original basket.
And I did take a picture of that basket
Yeah.
at your house, because you showed me that.
And it was the only thing I could really find when I was going through, sales and looking up Salish art facts. And that basket, somehow, I can't remember how I got it, from whom I bought it, but it was incorporated into the label. A friend,
By a friend.
Susan Swanson.
So, the best wines that you made, what would you say were your best wines and your best years? And I was just thinking, about this time period, didn't Mount St. Helens blow? Did that affect you?
I'll never forget that.
I don't think any of us will ever forget that. You especially.
My tractors were never had cabs on them. They were just, we were out, in the thing. Well, anyway, the ash went into the exhaust. And I was forever trying to get that tractor started. And I had to learn how to bleed the diesel line, which is not a very glamorous thing to do. And another thing that happened with that ash was that I didn't think the grapes were going to perform in 1980 because the leaves were just covered with ash. So I had to hire a bunch of gals and guys to shake the wires of the trellises to get the ash off. And then I went, what did I take? I blew them off with a hose too. I think I filled the sprayer. I don't know if you were there, we moved down yet in 1980.
Yeah.
And we were just doing everything possible to get the ash off so they'd bloom. And there actually were some fairly decent ones, but not a big crop in 1980. But it required all these tweakers to get the trellises and get the leaves cleaned up with stuff. And then my tractor was always having problems breathing because of the ash got, because we had what, 2 or 3 different times that ash actually fell.
Well,
Sand.
yeah, I lived in eastern Washington at the time.
So it drifted your way sometimes.
Yes, it did, and, it was just horrible, and I had a brother-in-law that did have, raspberries in Cedar, Washington,
Okay.
and I know at first they thought it was gonna ruin. It actually turned out, didn't it, to be kind of a fertilizer of sorts?
Yeah.
And I just wondered if that happened with the grapes, as well. They're a lot more hardy than a raspberry, but, it was certainly a challenge.
And I was thinking, I think it got into the crust of one of our pieces of equipment that we used to crush the grapes. Because you couldn't get it off the grapes if there was still some sand, caught in the stems particularly.
Well, and then I think the weight of it too, on the least, and that, you have to have sun for grapes, a little bit of sun to kind of, you can make it, yeah. So that was a real problem, I know.
We needed the little tornado we got. Sometimes later it knocked down all the trellises down the line, and we had it come through. But yes, that would have been helpful after the hurricane. If we would have had the little tornado after we had the asphalt, given it enough, rather than, our weather events didn't come together very well.
No, they didn't, you didn't have that direct line with somebody up above telling what you wanted to, what kind of weather you wanted to have, right?
No, I never had a choice.
So, this truly has been an experience, hasn't it?
Mhm.
Has it been fun though, hasn't it? He's speechless.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I think the one thing that I liked, because there were 100 people in the center when we moved here.
100 people.
Yeah.
No,
400, well, it's not a very
400.
large
We got
population.
4,000 now, so it's, you know,
So at least it brought people up, an assortment of people came to taste the wines and buy them, and so it was kind of a social thing too. And we later hired a gal or guys to run the tasting room, and we had to be somewhere, but we had it open on the weekends, and so it was a good source of meeting people and talking to trade. And so those were the good times, the social times. But you know, the work itself is difficult. It may be a dream. A concept, you know, of it, but the actual work is really hard.
So, because you didn't know how, did you take special classes on how to make this?
I
or-
tried to, and I bought, there were some books available, but usually they were for California. You know, and which wasn't relevant to this weather, because they don't have the rain problems, and the animals or pests are different. And then Oregon had some wine councils that had some seminars later on, and I would go down to those, and that's where I met a lot of Oregon speakers.
So I have to tell you that I read in one of the magazines or articles, actually it was the newspaper, magazine, that you had a little secret when you when you were fermenting the Pinot. Do you remember that?
No, really?
Well, I just read it, so then you put some stems in, a little bit of stems.
Oh, yeah, if you needed tannic acid, wine has
Uh-huh.
lots of acid. And sometimes if you fermented them on the stems, they got bitter, and sometimes they improved the acidity, so.
So,
That was a gamble, we don't remember how
It
we
was a
decided how
gamble.
many stems to leave them on.
yeah. I mean, I think we read about someone using
Yeah.
stems in their processing, so we decided to do that.
And for a while, Wazoo in Vancouver had Philanese and Crandall, Barry Crandall, does that sound right?
Yeah.
The extension service, who was interested in grape growing. He helped me with some deficiencies, like it's hard to set grapes if you don't have boron in the soil. And so I had to spray boron on them, and I wouldn't have known that. And so he was helpful with coming up with things like that.
so you've been here a long time. You bought this farm, and it's 12 acres in grapes, is it?
There were 12 in grapes, yeah.
I'm sure I thought they were more, it seemed like 50.
So, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently, or would there be anything that you would do differently?
Probably would have hired more helpers, especially with winching all those wires. There's acres and acres of wires on the trellis had to be tightened every year. But the only thing that I was very proud of, which made every male chauvinist cower, was that pulling all those wires gave me these biceps. I had something, and nobody believed it, and he had a lawyer friend, Richard Baxendale, he was joking about I couldn't be that strong. I said, put your elbow on the table, and he's like, he was startled, don't you think?
So she could keep you in line, couldn't she?
Unfortunately, age has taken its toll, and I haven't been, winching wires for a while, but I remember how, think about that, but, you're pulling tons,
Yeah.
tightening. There were, 4 to 6 wires on each trellis, and they all had to be tightened every year during the worst of the winter months.
So, when did you stop? When was the last year?
Well, come on, help me. It was the last edition, it was, and what we were putting, let's read our own bottles.
Does it have a year on it?
But I might have made a comment.
But,
No? Oh, here, 2004 cab and 2003 Vineyard. I did put on the percentages of grapes.
So 2004 was probably, that sounded like
Are the grapes still on your property?
Yes, and
Yeah.
only the grandchildren are happy with that. Because they used to be when they were little, I mean, now they're all, and, well, I have 2 seniors in high school and 2 in college, so they're all above 16 now. And when they were little, they could go out, and in the autumn, they could find blackberries and grapes on the wires. And then they could just eat all of them, so they enjoyed them being overgrown, but as you all know, blackberries are awful once you get them in there. And I had to fight them all the years that we were growing grapes, and then after I stopped farming, yes, the blackberries took over. They love the wires, you know, all the trellises. Yes. So I revenged my queen and potatoes, that's what all. Oh, and the lemon pudding, the blackberry lemon pudding, yes.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that was a good one, even the grandchildren. liked that.
So, okay, what made you is that when you kind of figured you wanted to retire from that?
Oh, I think probably just physically, and it was getting very competitive, you know. We went from a few wineries in Washington, Oregon to, are there over 250 now? Something like that.
Oh,
that. Hundreds of them now.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and so the competition was getting stiff and stiffened. And it is, you know, I would drive orders over to Longview, which is only a half-hour away, but I also was getting orders from the coast. And I was making some pretty long trips, and up to Seattle, Koloff, and my vans were, and I was getting, you know, to the age of my, well, it would have been well, these wines wouldn't have been produced, you know, bottled until what, about 2006 or so. So in 2006, I would have been up there.
Up there.
I'm 81 now, so, yes.
Well, see, that I can't even believe. I cannot even believe. And I think, you know, it makes me happy to sit here and to see this because it's a dream come true, and it was a labor of love. And I'm sure it took a lot between both of you.
It was a labor of love and labor. You forget the labor of hard work.
Yes, hard work. And you know, I don't think I'll ever forget the time coming and visiting your winery and going into the, I had my family, my youngest brother and his wife, and there were one of my grandsons, and then there was my brother's, what would be my nephew. Anyway, I went and asked you, is it okay if they eat some of the blackberries, because there are blackberries.
I forgot.
Oh my gosh, and I'm asking, because I told them, ask if you can eat them before you do. And then I asked Joan, and the kids turned around and their faces were all, I was horrified, but you said that, you know, you let the kids eat the blackberries. Oh, that was so fun.
Oh.
So we certainly, we miss not having that, you know, and, what are your future plans, do you know?
Well, I know that we're going to sell the place. And, one of our youngest son wants to have a home on the property, so we're trying to get that saved for him, but it's too much to manage that.
Oh, my
The whole
gosh.
property is over 20-some acres, isn't it? So,
Almost 30.
almost there.
And you're on a slope too.
Yeah.
And somebody just built a house on the Winery Road right below us. So people are, you know, and then we've got the development right across the road.
Things are just creeping up, just, you know, as I said, you know, we've gone from 400 in the center to 4,000.
I know,
And most of it's right close by, close in, you know, although a lot of it's got towards Wyndham now. So it's just a different town now.
Yes, the funny things that are going on over there. Somebody was raising Shetland ponies, and they got loose all in the vineyard, and they were going up and down the roads running. That was a very By the time.
In the fog.
Yeah. Yes, and another guy was trying to grow chickens around us, and the cannons in the fall. I got this really obscene call from this guy, said, my pullets can't lay. I didn't even know what a pullet was. He was just furious. He wanted to have my address and come shoot me. Yes.
He didn't know who he'd meet on the other end, though, did he?
There are strange things that happen that you won't want for this, but just the nature of man is so strange that I would buy so many shotgun shells to go firing just to the sky to get the robins and the deer and everybody out of there all the time. And some kids from one of it was G.I. Joe's, wasn't it? Wanted to come by because I used so many shotgun shells, they said they could help me. And unfortunately, I let them go loose, and they shot up all my glass half-gallon traps for yellow jackets. Yellow jackets eat grapes too, among other things. And so I had to put out all these traps of beer to attract them because it smells like fermenting sweetness. And then it was beer and honey and water. And all these yellow jackets would fly in and drown. Well, they shot those up to this glass all over the place. I could not believe what these two guys did when I said, oh, they could help me shoot. They didn't want to shoot to scare birds away or deer away. They wanted to shoot up the place. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
That is so funny.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, farming does bring, and winemaking particularly, and grapes growing does bring an interesting group to your place.
Well, I just going over some of these articles and got, here in the museum for people to read. It's just, to me, everything you did, you took a gamble, it's risk takers. And in our era, risk-taking wasn't that common, And it seems like, it appears anyway, just from talking with you both, when I still see you smiling and laughing over what happened, that it was a long journey, a learning experience, but the two of you did it.
And it was good for me in a way that wouldn't have affected a lot of people. But I had been covering the early part of the women's liberation movement for the Seattle Times, and I did stories of the first woman to carry the mail, the first woman to do so many things, and it sort of inspired me in a way, and to make it all come to a long end, or it's not semi-end, but semi-climax. I got an email from a friend in Seattle that said that the Seattle Times last weekend had in the enclosed Pacific magazine featured the women winemakers of the state, and that I was mentioned as the first and most successful. And I thought, I'll bring that article if she sends it to me. My email's gone out, so I don't know if I've reached her, but that was really kind of neat. Because when I was in the Seattle Times, there were 15 women out of 200 reporters. On the Spokesman Review, I was the only woman reporter. The Seattle PI, I was so rare that they let me fly with the Blue Angels because they wanted their first woman to go. And I was the only reporter on the PI at the time. Much later. But that being a female in the newsroom experience was an incredible thing, especially when I was writing about other women who were just finally getting an opportunity. You all remember, I'm sure, the days when they need not apply.
Right.
But the newspapers, and especially the union, I must say the Seattle Tacoma Newspaper Guild, insisted that they pay us the same, although it took a while. Yeah. So that helped.
Unusual.
Yeah.
It is unusual, yeah.
It was for the time. But I also had been on the Seattle Times copy desk editing, so I knew people, so when they finally decided I had one who reported about that job. It was frustrating, but it was exciting because there were so few of us.
Well, you certainly both have stories memories to go back on, and like I said, now you can laugh at some of the times you probably want to cry and hang a towel. And just some of the beautiful pictures from these articles, and I especially love this one where you're sitting, in the barrel and, Oh, that's one of the questions. Did you have to, are these oak barrels?
Yeah, they're French oak.
French oak barrels,
Yeah.
huh? Okay, yeah.
We had to have somebody come up from Oregon to give it a longer life. They had a company or two in what would have been the 70s and 80s
Yeah.
that would come out and scrape the char. They toast oak barrels to get a flavor, more flavor in them, and they would scrape it out and retoast them. And we have another 5 years of life or something. So, yes, the Barrel Builders, was that the name of the company? I think it even came out of California. But I had they did a tour finally. We got so many wineries that they could do a tour successfully, come up in California and go through Washington and get but we had specialty things like that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of it. There were people who rerouted oak barrels so they live longer. And I had a cough, which is a family name, COLF in this area. And one of them had a tree service, a nursery service at one time. We found some true French oak rather than George oak, which most of the oak trees in people's yards are. So we have in our yard a French oak tree, and we could put shavings in it, and we wouldn't people. Weird things you learn. Yes. Well, I think the worst thing I hated most about it, did I complain about this the most, is the tractor had a problem. If the tractor I currently had any kind of problems, I had to drive it to Dan's tractor in Battle Ground as the closest repair service. And if your tractor's sick, you don't really want to be driving it without a cab to protect you. If you suddenly lose power again, just, and changing a tire on a tractor. I didn't know, they look like they're full wear, right? No, they had this line in them, like swampy line fluid. It helped hold you on the hills. Wow. But can you imagine trying to pump up a tire that was full of line? Yeah. So, yes.
Well,
Strange things you learn when you're in
yes. It's strange things that we're learning about both of you.
You never learned to burn the diesel fuel line, did you?
No.
I had to get air out of the diesel fuel line off of that. Oh, that's strange. Yes. I want to pass that knowledge on to the boys. I mean, did you ever use that? Did you use it? Because I think the electric cars don't have any kind of extra things you do except have to plug in for a while to get charged.
A long while.
Yeah. The casino over here has a whole line of people who have electric cars can plug into these charging stations. Is that what they call them? It's kind of funny.
So is there, in closing, I think because we're, in closing, what would you, to sum up your whole little life journey? Do you have anything special that you'd like to say?
You go first.
I think he's laughing because he must have something.
Oh,
I don't know. I mean,
it was
It's
interesting.
supposed to-
My life has always been interesting. I've always been a social kind of person, and so, both in the newspaper business, I can remember dreading certain stories, like having to interview every 100-year-old. There was a time when we did that. And then I remember finally finding a good question. And that's kind of how I feel about, life in general. And the question to ask 100-year-olds, which era of your life did you like the most?
Okay, that's the answer. I know you're not 100 years old, but.
Yeah, but it is, you do, it made newspaper reporting of dull subjects interesting to me, to see what they'd come up with. And I think that's happened in the wine business, that even though I had a high school teacher, I'll never forget this, his name was Nygaard, and I wanted to take calculus, math. And he said, well, you've had geometry, and you've had algebra, women don't need anymore. And I remember swearing at him when I was calculating all the volumes. You had your reports for the state liquor board had to be in metrics, and the ATF nationally had to be in gallons, and I had to do all these calculations of volume of my tanks, and I had never been able, because of the times I went to high school, to take calculus, which would have helped immensely. But I did learn how to titrate, find acidity, and do a whole bunch of things that that you can learn by going to, special classes. And, or even wine societies were helpful. I can't remember what was the name of that group, but that was quite organized. But it did have seminars, so you could go and learn about these things and more about figuring out the acidity of the wines and what to do with the elements that are high. So, Mr. Nygaard was wrong. I did need calculus, and I needed more chemistry.
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't know, I just thought that Joan has been the one that's really been in charge of the winery and the vineyard, and I've just sort of been bottle washer and carrying things around, and so it's really her accomplishment.
well, there's where that labor of love, because look at you both there. Because, and I think that, it's just interesting hearing what you're talking about the women's suffrage. I wouldn't have even thought about how this would play into this whole opportunity that you took to grasp things, to go out and do things, that you could do it.
Yeah.
Even if you couldn't do it, you found that way to do
Yeah,
it.
and
And
I
that's a lesson
and I do
for
think-
anybody.
Yeah, that covering the women's living room did, inspire that kind of thing, that you can do things, because I met a lot of women who were, for the first time, fighting to be firewomen, fighting to be mail carriers, and fighting to be something other than a secretary or school teacher. But school teachers, I have sons, and so I'm really proud of them. And of course, one teaches science and one math.
There you go. There you go.
Subjects I was denied.
I think we wish you a very, very happy retirement. And I like to say when you stop, just like you said, this isn't the end, this is the beginning. Only the beginning of going back and reading your own stories to make, to bring them up again and to laugh over some of those times when you thought you'd never be able to do it. And to take that risk. To take that risk, because that's so important. And I always like to say, if you believe you can do something, you'll achieve it. And it seems as if you both did. So we thank you for